And welcome in. Late Kick is live. It is Tuesday night, October 5th, year of our Lord, 2021. We got a jam-packed show. But before we talk about anything related to college football, it is the rare exception where we're just going to lead with our show. You look around, and things seem a little bit different tonight. And because Director Colin is not on the road with me every Saturday in the fall, he kind of hangs around here. Sometimes I know what he's doing. Sometimes I don't know what he's doing. But he kind of built us a new studio. If you really look around and think about it, this place is brand new. We just moved in, Colin, about 15 minutes ago. It's great. The air condition works. The camera quality is better. We got spiffy animated graphics. And most importantly, Colin tells me the video will never freeze. And so that's all well and good. We got the same show. We're not changing anything about that. We just don't have to drive nearly as far to get where we're going because we are now high atop downtown Nashville, Tennessee. Real talk, though. Thanks to all the folks at CBS and thanks to all the folks at CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports as well. But thank you, most importantly, to you guys, because this is a product of you. And every now and then when I tell you, hey, there's some things happening behind the scenes. I was in a meeting today. There are some things moving forward from then a crawl to a walk to a run. Now we're hurdling things. All this stuff is because of you. We're not changing anything about the product. We're just making it look a little better. We got a new coat of lipstick that we get to put on now. It is all because of you, and this is not the end of that. As Nick Saban said once upon a time, it's only the beginning. So thank you for making all this possible. And in turn, we got some more stuff coming back to you. Again, I can't always talk about it right up front. I just tease, and then eventually down the road it happens. But trust me, things are happening, so thank you. It is, with that in mind, Tuesday night, and as I said, it is October 5th, but more importantly, Tuesday night means it is prediction night around here. We're headed to Dallas Saturday, obviously, for the Red River Shootout. Pew, pew. We're going to talk about and break down and predict Oklahoma, Texas tonight. I've also got Penn State, Iowa. I've got to do Georgia, Auburn for you. Some people said, oh, I don't think the upset could happen there. Well, it could. Doesn't mean it's likely, but it could happen. We also got a brand new JP poll, sure to be controversial tonight. There is one move in particular that I'm a little bit suspicious of, but not quite as suspicious as when Oklahoma was number 3 a couple of weeks ago. We do have a number 3, though. Some teams won and fell. Some teams lost and didn't fall far enough. At least that's what your opinion will be. So we'll discuss all that. I've got to talk in greater detail about Ed Orgeron and this situation at LSU. I don't think it's going to end well, and I don't really think it has anything to do with what's going to happen this weekend. Like LSU could win or lose by 17 Saturday. I think they're probably already past the point of no return there. So thank you so much for tuning in at Late Kick Josh. Make sure you're following there. I got a couple of more best bets tonight, but we've already released them earlier today. If you're following on Twitter or Instagram, you already saw that. Okay, so with that in mind, as you can see, even though it's the first show in our new studio, we've got a little cup here full of hot water and honey because this is a brand new building, so that's pretty much all we could find. We're going to hope, fingers crossed, that the voice makes it through tonight. And come January, I'll just spend a month not talking and we'll fully get it back. Okay, so Texas, Oklahoma this Saturday, noon Eastern, 11 a.m. local time kickoff. We're going to be right there on the field for this one. The current number, now Jesse and I were talking earlier today, the current number, we had 2.5, okay? So, but then it moved. And so then we had Oklahoma minus 3.5. So that's where the current number rests. I'm going to show you what our model thinks. I'm going to tell you what we think about the game. But let's talk about this first off. We're at the halfway point of the season. Really, week 6 marks the halfway point of the season. But yet you're still early enough in a season where you don't really know what a team's peaking point is, what their maximum potential is, in other words. Now, with Texas, you've had some wild swings. You had them lose outright to Arkansas. You had them just blow the doors off Texas Tech, and so you've seen a lot of variance, just like a roller coaster ride, wild fluctuation. With Oklahoma, at least for the last 3 weeks, it's been a lot more consistent a result, but when you think about it, they won 23-16 against Nebraska, 16-13 against West Virginia, 37-31, little backdoor cover there for Kansas State, and they've been more consistent, but there's always this fear. And I think there's a fear in the back of a lot of Texas Longhorn fans' minds right now, or anyone who's going to bet Texas, and that is we've probably seen Texas peaking. I mean, that Texas Tech game, they were on fire. I don't know that I've seen Oklahoma peak. Now, the follow-up question, and the one we're about to dive into, is that game out there for them? I tend to believe yes. I don't think you can have a roster like Oklahoma has and you never peak. So you have that knowledge in the back of your mind. And the more you love Texas this weekend, if you do, the more that whisper is louder and louder in the back of your mind of telling you, hey, you know that game's out there. you know eventually they're going to click. You just hope it's not against you. I think Spencer Rattler's the most important player in this game. You could make the argument for Bijan Robinson. I'm about to talk about Robinson, but I think Spencer Rattler's the most important player in the game, and that is, of course, the Oklahoma quarterback, because I think Texas can win with decent to pretty good numbers from Casey Thompson. I do not think Oklahoma can win with just decent to pretty good numbers for Spencer Rattler. I don't think the running game, while it's not porous, is going to be there to the degree Oklahoma is going to need it to be to win if Spencer Rattler's not on. So B-plus performance for him relative to his capability level is the minimum baseline that I need here from him. But if you go back and you rewatch their game against Kansas State last Saturday, I thought Spencer Rattler not only played very well, I don't think he got enough credit for the way he played. Now, Oklahoma wasn't terrible running the ball, but Spencer Rattler was asked to do a lot, and he did a lot in that game. As it turns out, they needed every one of those 37 points, and he got it done. So the question now as we move forward to the Texas game, for me, is going to be how many explosive plays are there? And if the answer is not a whole lot, then the follow-up, which would make me a little more concerned, is can I count on Spencer Rattler? In a game he got benched in 1 year ago, remember, I think that's probably going to be over-discussed this week, but it did happen. Can I count on him to put together enough methodical 9 to 12 or 13 play drives to put enough points on the board to win the game? And if you could tell me how many points are going to be needed, I'd appreciate that too. Here's where I really like Texas. I'm going to show you what the model thinks in a second, but here's where I really like Texas. Whereas Rattler may be the most important player in the game, I think Bijan Robinson, the running back for Texas, is the best player in the game. I am not going to go the Gary Patterson route and tell you he was irresponsibly handled last week. I think those 35 carries were warranted. But I will also tell you, I would worry normally in this spot for Texas about them being able to trade points and them being able to keep up. I don't know if that's going to be the kind of game. I'm not telling you 16 to 13 is in the cards, but I'm telling you, I think with the presence of a guy like Bijan Robinson at running back, and also knowing that you can extend drives with him, and you can win third downs, but also how effective he is out of the backfield catching the ball, and with the knowledge that last week Deuce Vaughn, I think he had 10 catches for 104 yards. In fact, Deuce Vaughn, who is the running back for Kansas State, was their leading receiver last week. So if they were able to do that, I believe Bijan Robinson is going to have a fair amount of success in this game. If you want to know what you should expect from him just the rest of the season, it's Najee Harris. That's exactly how Steve Sarkisian evolved the role of Najee Harris last year. So, Jesse, we're very excited to be at this game. Let's take a look at what the model thinks about it. And right now, as we showed you, and you've seen on the lower third, the current number is Oklahoma minus 3.5. Now, here's what's interesting. The model not only disagrees with the number, our model actually thinks the wrong team's favored. Our model has Texas -1. And so the more I thought about what I can count on in the game, the more I can't stop coming back to the running aspect of it. And the more I can't stop coming back to one like feature, bell cow back. Kennedy Brooks is not a bad running back. But man, when I know I've got Bijan Robinson there, and when I know it's a third down game, and when I know that I can count on him and I don't have to ask Casey Thompson to win the game, even though he's capable of it, to win the game for me, I look at the consistency that I think Texas can have on the ground, and I do think it gives them the edge. And it's not so much drawing off what I've seen recently. Like I don't always believe in, ooh man, throw the records out the window for this rivalry game. Any given team, any given year. I don't always believe in that. In this one, I do. This is actually the way the Red River Shootout plays out. So independent of what we've seen so far, but also helpfully drawing off of what we've seen so far, I'm not only going to take Texas to cover, I'm going to also take them to win the game. Very close, one possession either way. This is not an overly confident take it to the bank type pick, but I do slightly lean Texas. So we'll take the Horns to cover and we'll take the Horns to win. I'll tell you what I do expect though, either way. Not only a great game, but obviously a great scene. Now, as I've told you all week, we have never been to the Cotton Bowl. We have never gotten to go to this game as a fan, as an esteemed member of the media. So we're really looking forward to Saturday. But also, man, I really tend to believe Academy Sports and Outdoors is going to be well represented in the tailgating scenes all across the country. We're about to do the Penn State-Iowa game in just a second. Georgia's going to Auburn. I mean, imagine the tailgating potential. Imagine the tailgating scenes. If you could just take one big spider cam, that's that camera above the field, and you could just run it across the United States, and you could look around and look at all those beautiful tents and look at that grill smoke start to hover about 11, about noon, depending on when you're playing. All those smells, indescribable. If you walk through a legitimate college tailgating scene, the smells are indescribable. And I'm just talking food, nothing else. Not that you would smell anything else in those tailgates. But Academy Sports and Outdoors is the place to go to get everything you need to make that mental picture that you're sharing with me right now complete. Like I said, they got the canopies, they got the shirts, they got the grills, they got the gear, they got the balls you need to throw around to kill some time. They got everything in between. They are the official sporting goods supplier not only of the Big 12 and the SEC, but of Late Kick. And they and I are both ecstatic at how much you guys have kind of latched onto this idea of, I'm going to go and I'm going to patronize them because they happen to reside on my favorite show. So I appreciate that it's your favorite show. They appreciate that the partnership has kind of spurred you to come to their establishment, or if you can't get there, just go to academy.com. It helps everyone out. You know, if I'm being real with you, if you'll look around at this new studio we're in, I'd be lying if I said the kinds of things you're doing with Academy didn't help us build stuff like this. So thumbs up. Thank you. Academy Sports and Outdoors. All right, here we go. This is the game that a lot of you are mad that we're not going to be at. Here's your endpoint, Colin. Penn State at Iowa. This is a 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. local time kickoff. It's this Saturday. Iowa is a short favorite right now. This game, I believe, is on Fox. Iowa, a favorite of under a field goal. So this is really close to a pick'em. Home field is big here. I don't know how much you would factor it. I think it's worth a good 4 3/4 to 5 points. Kinnick Stadium, when I was up at Penn State a couple of weeks ago, talking to some of their staffers after the game, that was the topic on some of their minds is we're starting to look down the road a little bit. You know, all due respect to Villanova, starting to look down the road a little bit. Wonder what time that Iowa game would be. Josh, do you know what time that Iowa game would be? Yeah, guys, being the Fox employee that I am, let me tell you. Oh, wait, I have no clue. But I did suspect that it was going to be a noon game. Well, we didn't get the noon kickoff, but we also don't have a night game. It's a happy medium. So it's a 4 o'clock kickoff. Listen, there's been an ugly, ugly rumor floating around. Colin, you know what the rumor is. It is Josh hates Iowa. Josh does not hate Iowa. No, he does not. The ammunition you have used to fuel this rumor is, number one, I don't have them ranked as highly in the JP poll as the AP does. But I got news for you. I don't have Penn State as high in the JP poll that we're going to show you later in the show as the AP does. I haven't been called a Penn State hater. And secondly, this is really what I think it stems from. Probably Chris Hassel's trash talk, or as we like to call it, harassment. But more specifically, I think it's because we're not going to Iowa City this week. And I just got to tell you, this was not an apples to apples. I've already seen Iowa in person this year. I've already seen Penn State in person this year. Conversely, I've never seen this year OU or Texas. I've never gone to Red River, and it's a rivalry game. Also, it's a noon kickoff, so I can get back in Nashville that same day. There was a lot working against this game. But that doesn't mean there's hatred there. So let's dive into the actual game, because the biggest challenge here is finding really the discernible edge. Look how lean forward I am. I'm into this thing. Outside of home field advantage, where are the discernible edges? I sat in what I guess is my office. I don't know, I just stole a conference room today. There's no one in the building, so we can sit wherever we want to. And I sat there and I had paper strewn all over the place. I actually, and I rarely do this, I actually went over to our buddies at College Football Nerds. And I watched their preview of this game because I was very interested to see what their model said. And I think they had something that was just absurd because of all the turnovers Iowa has forced. They had Penn State, I think, significantly outgaining Iowa, and then Iowa winning by double digits, which makes no sense except that it's happened already this year. So yeah, that very well could happen. Here I sit, and here I say things like, I am not going to base my predictions on games in the future based off turnovers that have happened in the past. I just don't think it's a good predictor. And then here come Iowa folks, and they throw down papers in front of you and say, hey, buddy, we've been doing this for a while. We've been winning turnover margin, and we've been winning games based off a wave of points off turnovers for a while. And here's the thing. They're right. They're right. You keep expecting things to change, and they never do. And so Iowa folks are right about that. I just have a very hard time squaring that because there aren't a lot of teams out there. Iowa is the unicorn. They're the exception. They're the one team that you can look at and say, you guys, I think I can count on 7 points off turnovers, just non-offensive points. I can actually count on them for you. You don't say that about anyone else. That's stupid. You don't ever count on that. But yeah, you can make the argument you're supposed to count on it now with Iowa. And here's the problem. I don't have a fancy name for this, but there's a metaphor I always like to use when you play really solid defense, but you don't have five-star athletes all over the place. That means that the sum is greater than the individual parts. That is the hallmark of a great team, and that's the hallmark of a great coaching staff. That's what Iowa is. Do you hear what I just said? Great. Not good. Great. What I always believe about teams like that is if they faced a certain level of athleticism, then you would have a heavy enough sledgehammer to break the ice. If you've ever watched like those ice road truckers, they can drive trucks over that ice because the ice is so thick. Well, if you also ever watched Family Matters back in the day, when Carl Winslow and fam went out on the lake, it wasn't frozen thick enough to where they could go out there. No questions asked. And the ice starts to crack. Well, Iowa has got some pretty thick ice about their defense. It's really hard to crack it. If they were playing Alabama Saturday, Bama would crack it. Eventually, Bama would score 35 if they needed to against Iowa. But they're not playing Alabama Saturday. And so my question for a team that I think ranks like 62nd in scoring offense out there in Penn State, my question is simply, do they swing a heavy enough offensive sledgehammer to crack Iowa's ice? I don't think they do. And I also really, really need to speak slower when I say that kind of sentence, because when we're talking about cracking Iowa's ice, if you say it fast, it really sounds a lot dirtier than I want it to. But I don't think they can do it. And Jesse, by the way, producer Jesse up in Connecticut, is a Penn State alum. And I pressed him a couple of weeks ago when they played Auburn. I said, Jesse, let's just be real. Between you and me, the fate of your entire family is on the line. Who are you picking? He said, I'm going to pick Penn State. And he said it again today. He said, I'm going to pick Penn State. You didn't even ask me to put my family on the line. I'm going to pick Penn State this time. I feel okay about it. Here's the key for Penn State, because I don't know. I'm much more trepidatious, if you will. Here's the key for Penn State, though. They got to be clear about what they need. And what I mean by that, since it sounds very commonsensical, Penn State's just got to be clear about what they need. And here is what I mean to a finer point. If you have an even turnover game, you got to believe if you're Penn State, we play some pretty salty defense ourselves. If we can score 20 offensive points in an even turnover game, that should be enough to win. For the record, I believe that in an even turnover game, 20 offensive points, plus whatever else you get, would be good enough to win. Here's what that means. That means if it's 3rd down and 13, you just live to fight another set of downs and you punt the ball. If you go for it on 3rd and 3, well, of course you go for it on 3rd down. I mean, if you're sitting there 3rd and 3 and then you're 4th and 1, you may have to punt it. You may have to go against the more aggressive script, in other words, that college football and analytics says you should go, because you don't have to trade points. You don't have to do that. You got to understand that Iowa looks at you and Iowa views one of their most important offensive weapons as your offense. You are one of Iowa's biggest weapons. Iowa State didn't realize it. Maryland didn't realize it. So many victims before. Indiana didn't realize it. Iowa's best chance to score is when your offense is on the field. So don't let it happen. Be comfortable in being patient. And don't let them sit there and tempt you to come meet them in the deep end of the pool. You don't have to do that. If you trust your recruiting and development and you trust your athletes, over a 4-quarter game, you should find enough margin to get the victory. But it's not going to happen in the first quarter. It's not going to happen by halftime in all likelihood. Huge week for Sean Clifford, quarterback at Penn State. Huge week for Mike Yursich, formerly Tom Yursich on this show. They've got to operate efficiently early, because what they can't have is the usual Iowa gets up on you and then they just sit back and get ready. They just duck down in the tall grass and they get ready. You can't have that. How about for once, try and see what Spencer Petras looks like when he has to operate under pressure. Try and put them in a situation where they got to throw the ball. Feels like we'll never see that with Iowa. Well, it stands to reason. You're the best team they've played so far. You actually are also the best team they've played so far, so that kind of balances out. But there's a stat that I don't know if it exists, but I would call it, if it did exist, the hinge per play factor. The hinge per play factor in this game will be off the charts, meaning every single play they run in this thing could have such a wild, wild effect on the outcome, because points are going to be at such a premium. So, Jesse, let's show the folks what the model ran and then said about this thing. I'm going to tell you what I think. So the number right now is Iowa -2. Okay, that's our latest number. We, again, for the second game in a row, at least the model, thinks the wrong team is favored. The model has Penn State minus 1.5. Now, what that means is the model believes Penn State is about 5 points better than Iowa on a neutral field, and home field's bringing that down there. That's what it says. I believe the gap between the teams is probably a little bit smaller than that. And so by the slimmest of margins, I will roll with the model. And I'm telling you, I'm on the seesaw, and it's leaned 51% over here. But I am going to take Penn State to cover and, of course, Penn State to win the game. I really, really think that some random special teams play, I mean, somebody that doesn't field a punt and lets it go 26 yards further downfield, that is the kind of hinge per play factor that could literally turn this game. You watch Texas, Oklahoma, I mean, there may be 50 or 60 first downs combined. You watch this game, you are going to fight. You're going to knife fight to get every first down. I personally love that kind of football. I don't think it has to be a pinball game every Saturday, so I love that kind of stuff. Also, you should probably be out of there, I don't know, by 6:30. Should be good. Maybe get home before dark. You know, maybe toss the pig around in the front yard. So looking forward to that one. Oh boy, am I looking forward to that one. I wish we could be in two places at once, guys. Thus far, we have not figured out a way to do it. All right, got one more game to break down. Also have JP poll coming up. Also have best bets coming up. So stick around would be my humble advice. Would you break this game down if you ran this show? If this were late kick with fill in the blank, would you break this game down? Georgia favored by 14.5 at Auburn. At least that's what the line was when we made the graphic earlier. It still is. I look over at the monitor there. This is the Saturday 3:30 Eastern game on CBS. Funny thing at Auburn, so Auburn's in Lee County, Alabama. Allegedly, all of Alabama is on Central Time. But Auburn is on Central Time. Phoenix City, Alabama, which is closer to the Georgia line, it's right on the Chattahoochee River, they go on Eastern Time. And so somewhere, no one really quite knows where the line is in Lee County, but somewhere as you're driving out 280, you cross into Central Time. And the phones can make no sense of it. The iJosh gets thoroughly confused because it thinks when you cross the river, it's supposed to go to Central Time. And then you go over and McDonald's is still not open, and you say, you guys are supposed to be open. No, buddy, got to wait an hour. So no one really knows how that works. But it is a 3:30 Eastern kickoff. That's what we do know. It's an interesting little dynamic here, combination of dynamics going on. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Georgia has been crowned in a lot of corners of the country this week as the best team in the country. We will show you the JP poll tonight and see if we agree. So you got that going for you if you're Auburn. And then number two, Georgia, it is true, will take it on the road in a truly hostile environment for the first and maybe the only time this year. Because pray for Vanderbilt as we do. We're not counting Commodore Stadium, where it was Georgia fans 2-to-1 ratio to Vandy fans. So yes, all that in the classical sense does figure to make things hard on Georgia. So here's what I want us to do. I want us to be kind and courteous, and let's try, for the sake of all of our Auburn fans, to find a path to the upset. Okay, we have agreed. Okay. So yes, it's true. The road factor could come into play here. Georgia has not faced anything like this year. I tend to believe it will be a factor, but I tend to believe you still have to have the kind of team to make it a factor. You don't, it's like when Penn State played Auburn. Yeah, Penn State had the home environment. They didn't sit around and wait for the crowd to beat Auburn. They went on the offensive and ended up beating Auburn. Can Auburn do that? You know, going on the offensive against Georgia, it's a lot easier said in a nice, comfortable studio than it is on a football field. I really wonder, does Auburn have the ability, just as a team, do they have the ability to get Georgia in any kind of pressure situation? Georgia didn't have to sweat against Arkansas. You know, Georgia obviously didn't have to sweat against Vanderbilt. And really, in retrospect, we may not have known it fully at the time, Georgia didn't have to sweat against Clemson, even though it ended up being a one-possession game. And Clemson wasn't going to score if they played till Wednesday, again, as it turns out. And so I wonder if Auburn can make Georgia or force Georgia to try and be aggressive. And then the second part of that is, I wonder if Todd Monken would be foolish enough to put Stetson Bennett in that position. Because this is, you know, kind of like the Penn State versus Iowa approach. If you're Georgia, punting's not the worst thing in the world. Throwing the ball away is not the worst thing in the world. Because you get the luxury of watching your defense go on the field and knowing I'd be shocked if they move the ball against them. Now, in reality, it's not always going to look statistically like it has so far for Georgia's defense, but, I mean, how's Auburn going to find 20 offensive points here? I'll just put it to you that way. There are other ways to score in this game. We all know that. Does Auburn find 20 offensive points? If so, that would be running it up on Georgia's defense based on what we've seen so far this year. But they got to win first downs to even have a shot at that. If you get predictable on third down, have you watched Georgia? It's terrible. It's terrifying. And the parents of those players are in the stands watching you do that to their kids. That's the worst part about it. It's a decently favorable matchup in one way for Auburn. And that is, Auburn held LSU, I think, they held them under 30 yards rushing. They held Penn State under 100 yards total rushing. Georgia's running game has gotten on track as of late, but it's been by choice. So if Auburn is able to limit them, running the ball a little bit, and at the very least, if it's Stetson Bennett, which we assume it will be at quarterback, if they just make Stetson Bennett have to throw the ball to beat him, and Todd Monken feels like we do want to press the issue a little bit, every time Georgia's putting the ball in the air, yes, theoretically, better things can probably happen for you in that chain of events than if you're on offense. That's how much I respect Georgia's defense right now. But, yeah, I don't know if they can get in that situation. That's the reason I'm spelling it out so basic there. I don't think they can get in that situation enough. But crazier things have happened. Maybe a special teams play, defensive play early for Auburn. It's 13-0 all of a sudden, and, they've got 26 yards total offense. That would be the kind of rare but possible fast start they would need. But I really wonder if it's just played straight up, I don't know where they find 20 offensive points. And the other thing to think about, and this is really where it goes sideways for Auburn, I think, is the advantage you had last week where LSU was spent by the fourth quarter, that could be Georgia's advantage this week. Because even though on the surface you both played high-profile matchups last week, Georgia never had to sweat. I mean, some of their key players barely on the field, double-digit snaps. They didn't have to sweat. You did. I mean, you played late into the night again, and you played in a hostile environment, and you got the win this time, but you had to fight to do it. And so you got to ask yourself, this has been a tough season now. Even against Georgia State, you guys had to fight, and so you keep having to empty the tank. And this is not a team that you can afford to play with anything less than a full tank for 4 quarters against. So, Jesse, we tried. Let's take a look at the model, and let's see what the model thinks. I got to tell you, if I was an Auburn fan, I'd be a little bit encouraged by what the model says. So the Vegas line right now is Georgia minus 14.5. That's what our model says, too. I just got to be honest with you. There are going to be few times this year where Georgia feels truly threatened. They weren't last week. Maybe Kirby Smart convinced them they should have been, so you see what the result was. But he gets to take them on the road this week. He called Bo Nix elite in his press conference, and so I think we all know what that's about. But he gets to convince his team, he being Kirby Smart, that they're actually in some danger this week, that this could be a treacherous spot for them. I expect nothing less than the best from Georgia this week, Stetson Bennett or JT Daniels. I don't really care. I don't think Auburn's got the bullets. I really don't. And so anything less than 14-plus non-offensive points, I think leads to not only a Georgia win, but I really think when we get into the second half, I think they're going to be able to name the score. So I think they're going to run it up a little bit. I think Georgia's going to win. I think Georgia's going to cover, and we'll probably hear a lot more of the same coming out of that. If that is the way it goes, you'll hear a lot more of, boy, Georgia looks invincible. I probably won't think any more of Georgia after this game than I do right now. Now, if they struggle, that things could change, but I think that it's kind of like we were talking about with Penn State, Iowa. Georgia's got that really thick layer of ice, and until you swing a sledgehammer that's heavy enough to crack that ice, you're going to be embarrassed against them. And really, there's one team in this conference that can probably do it. There may not be another one in America, but if there is, there's going to be 1 or 2 max who could do it. I just don't think their name is Auburn. That's all I'm saying. So I'm going to take Georgia to win. I'm going to take Georgia to cover. All right, Colin, here we go. Sip some of our lukewarm honey water now. It really soothes the throat, though. I like that. Okay, this is not going to be fun, but we do have to discuss it because a lot of you have asked about it. So the whole Ed Orgeron LSU future of the program situation, I think it's a little bit more clear. Like, I know you guys have been talking about it nonstop on talk radio down there. I know the websites have been churning, Twitter's been churning. I think it's decided. I don't think he's going to be there much longer. And I certainly don't think he'll be here this time next year. But I think the reason for that does not lie in the future. This is important to note as we have a game with LSU going on the road against Kentucky looming this Saturday. I don't think that game has much bearing at all on the outcome here. Whereas some other people I've talked to, they do think that. There's some other people who are painting this Saturday as a must-win. I think 5 years into a tenure, that's always dumb to look at it that way. Like you don't already know enough. You haven't already gathered enough information 5 or in some cases kind of 6 years in now. You don't already know everything you need to know about your head coach? Of course you do. If you're waiting for the outcome of one 4-quarter game to determine the future of your program, you're not the right person to be making the calls, to be honest with you. So I think opposite of how some people think about that. Now, a lot of people down there think it's already decided too. I just think the point of no return is not in the future. It's already in the rearview mirror. So let's talk about this for a second, because I'm sensing some outsiders who did not grow up and are not of LSU. I sense some people outside the LSU program don't really get what's happening here. The outside perspective that I've heard a lot is, what's wrong with those people? They just won a national title 2 years ago. Like, how ungrateful can you be? How much can you lack perspective? They don't lack perspective. They have perspective. Here's the difference. The difference is you're driving by the house. They're living in the house. Like, you're seeing the family at church on Sunday morning. They're in the house. They see what dad's like when he comes home from work on Tuesday night. My point is, things are far worse inside the LSU house than anyone from the outside realizes, and it didn't get that way last night, and it didn't get that way overnight. It's been that way for a while. 2019 has masked it for as long as it possibly could, but it's been that way for quite a while. And I'm not talking about a young team. I'm not talking about just needing to let some roots plant. I'm not talking about new coordinators, maybe just needing to get up to speed, or maybe a recruiting class that we need to trim some fat off of. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. We're talking about wholesale changes that have to be made. They've got chronic PR issues, up to and including dealing with the head coach, mainly dealing with the head coach. They've got a piss-poor culture. They've had it for a while. The internal dynamic there is bad. It has been for a while. You've got a run game, which is the hallmark of any good LSU team, that is totally evaporated. They couldn't crack 25 yards on the ground against Auburn. And then also their inability to make very basic week 1 install and fall camp type procedural decisions in games. It's costing them. And it all lies at the feet of the person who said, this version of LSU is my team. Because that's what Ed Orgeron told us over the summer. He said, the way we had to hire Pelini last year, that was kind of, he insinuated as much that it was kind of plopped in my lap. I was kind of force-fed that, but don't worry, because now I've made my hires. This is my team. I'm doing things my way. I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to believe you when you tell me that. So this is your team. This is your way. And what I'm telling you, and forget me, what more importantly, the LSU fan base is telling you, is your way's not good enough. So a couple of things can be true here. It can be true that Ed Orgeron was the perfect guy for the season of 2019. But this is a seasonal game. You don't just sit there and hit pause and freeze yourself in time. In 2021 and moving forward, Ed Orgeron's not the right guy for this season and future seasons at LSU. It doesn't mean you ever take away 2019. If you make a move, which I think they will, 10 years down the road, depending on how all this off-the-field stuff shakes itself out, you can get over your hard feelings. No one's mad about the run game in 2030. You could look back and you could bring Ed Orgeron in there. You could walk him around the field, and everyone could be very jovial about talking about, let's say in 2029, the 10-year reunion of that title team. But that's not right now. Right now, we're not worried about 2019. Right now, we're worried about whether LSU is going to end up going 500 in a non-COVID year when all the excuses are removed. So I'm not happy at all that that's the situation down there, but yet my feelings are independent of what reality is, and that is the situation down there. I think they're going to make a move. I think it's warranted. If you watch this show or listen to this show, I'm the last person to ever say it. So when I say it, it's normally well past time for it to happen. I do probably about one segment like this a year, and that's it. Like a lot of Florida fans are hitting me up right now saying, is it time to move on from Dan Mullen? No, it's not time to move on from Dan. Have you looked at Florida State and Miami lately? Look at LSU. That's when you know it's time to move on. If you're having to ask, it's not time. It's not time. Please realize when you're on a 10-rung ladder and you're on rung 7, there's a lot further to go down than there is to go up. LSU's not on rung 7. They're down on rung 2 or rung 3. And so at that point, you are past the point of no return. It is time to make a move. Okay. With that in mind, let's talk about the JP poll. So I got to pull up the thing here because we are so new in this building, I don't even have a printer yet. But here it is. I've got the JP poll. Okay. Quick reminder what this is. Have to do it every week, and it will fall on deaf ears or death ears. this is not a rankings system. Can't stress it enough. This is not a ranking system. I can tell you confidently Iowa is not going to be in my top 5 here. If I were filling out an AP ballot, if I were on the playoff committee, the University of Iowa would be in my top 5 because that is merit-based and that is judged based on your resume of things you have done. The JP poll only cares about the future and only cares about who it would pick against who on a neutral field if they played tomorrow. That's it. Nothing you've done so far matters, at least in terms of you deserving a reward. It doesn't automatically drop you if you lose a game. So as sure as I explain that, like 60% of you won't get, well, the 60% who comment will not have listened to it. Let me put it that way. But I digress. We're in it for the love of the show. So let's go, Colin, Jesse, everybody. Let's tee it up, and let's start with the 25 through 21. We do have a new entrant here. A couple of them, actually. So Wake Forest is at 25. It's the first time the Demon Deacons have been in here. My taste, I think they're still too low. So even though this thing says JP poll, I disagree with it on the regular. Like, for instance, 24. UCLA thoroughly disappointed me last week. I thought they'd drop out. As it is, they're down to 24. A&M is down another 8 spots to 23. They're mainly riding just roster strength right now. That's all that has them in the top 25. Nebraska's at 22. They're up 8 spots. Nebraska is in the top 25. This is momentous, and they play Michigan Saturday, friends. We're going to talk a lot more about that game Thursday. I think I went into a pretty lengthy diatribe about that on this morning's Late Kick Extra podcast. Clemson is at 21. I'm told Clemson dropped out of the AP poll. I don't think that's quite warranted. I think a lot of people just wanted to do it so they could sound cool and say, we dropped Clemson out of the AP. I'm telling you, there are not 25 teams that would be favored against Clemson tomorrow, and that's the way this poll works. So you do you, we'll do us. Okay, let's keep moving. Number 20 is Notre Dame. Notre Dame, Jesse tells me I had a typo, so he fixed it. Notre Dame is down 1 spot to number 20. Michigan State rises 4 spots to 19. Kentucky rises 3 spots to 18. Auburn is sitting there at 17. How about Pitt? So Pitt debuted in the JP poll last week. They are now up another 8 spots. Pitt is at 16. Pitt's a good team, man. You can handpick a few teams that are even above them that you'd probably rather play this Saturday than playing Pitt. I'll show you right now. Keep on going. At number 15, Iowa State's still there. Iowa State has lost 2 games because of losing the turnover battle, which counts. That means you lose. But in a pure power rating, it also means you're not going to drop nearly as far as if you just flat out got outgained and outplayed, et cetera, et cetera. That's the difference between rankings and ratings. I would never rank Iowa State 15th. Oregon dropped pretty precipitously. And even though I love weather, you know how rarely I use the word precipitously when talking football. They're at 14. Arizona State's a big riser. I just think the model's been a little bit wrong on Arizona State. Now, full disclosure, I'll tell you why. We did manual overrides for Arizona State, which we normally don't do. In fact, we don't ever touch most teams. But we manually downgraded Arizona State because I believed that the internal dynamic there, because of the NCAA stuff, was going to have an impact. And thus far, it really hasn't. So this is basically kind of removing the manual overrides, and it's back in line now with what Arizona State would have been if we just believed in what Preview Magazine culture told us. So Arizona State's at 13. There's a really good team. I mean, they handled UCLA the other night. Arkansas only dropped 2 spots to number 12. We believe that Georgia would do that to a lot of teams down here. There's no reason to drop them. Florida dropped 7 spots to number 11. I think that may be a little too far. This is my personal taste. But that only rings true if the Kentucky game was an outlier. So let's wait and see if the Kentucky game was an outlier or if that just ends up being what puts them on a slippery slope to another 8-win season or something like that. All right, top 10 time. Iowa is a top 10 team now. Did you hear me? Did you hear what I said? Iowa is a top 10 team. Hassle. I don't know what more you want from me. Top 10 is really good. That means there's only 9 teams ahead of you. It means there's 120 some odd teams behind you. And that's great. You finish in that percentile and you're landing on the honor roll. So Iowa's at number 10. Again, if I had them ranked, I would have them ranked higher. This is a power rating, and Iowa's at number 10. Michigan is now a top 10 team. Hello, Big Ten. Michigan is number 9. Oklahoma, creeping back up, 1 spot at a time, to number 8. There is a team we still haven't mentioned yet. Have you picked up on it? Ole Miss only dropped 2. Now, this is going to rub some people the wrong way. So let me explain to you what this is. It's an itchy eyebrow. That's why I'm scratching it with my pen. What happened was I think we had Ole Miss 5th, and we had Bama 1. And the model thought Alabama would beat Ole Miss by 21 points. Well, that's what happened. They beat them by 21 points. And so if the same model that predicted that score had the teams rated where they were rated, the model sees no reason to change. In fact, what happened is a couple of teams jumped Ole Miss. We didn't really drop them. I don't think their rating changed at all. We didn't really drop them, but a couple of teams moved ahead of them. One of them, Cincinnati. And Cincinnati is actually unchanged, but the rating changed. I'll show you why in a second. Cincinnati's number 6. How about this top 5, though? I mean, you talk about a monumental rise from the ashes. The Texas Longhorns have gone from being 25th 2 weeks ago to now being our number 5 team. That never happens. Never happens. But in 2 weeks, it's because of the shift at quarterback. That has happened. That's the only way that could ever happen. Like if Joe Burrow got hurt in 2019 for a couple of weeks and then he came back, this is the kind of fluctuation you would see. So crazy. So Texas is number 5. That means we view Red River as a top 10 matchup. Penn State's at 4. A lot of you are skeptical about that. I'm just telling you what the model says. Penn State's at 4. Ohio State has vaulted all the way back up to number 3. Keep in mind, that team, Ohio State, lost to Oregon. We got Oregon at 14 now. We think if that game were to happen again today, we wouldn't really care where it was played. We think the outcome would be different. But that's not the way football works. I understand that. But we're talking about today moving forward. Ohio State's all the way back up at number 3. Their resume does not warrant that. What the model thinks they are today moving forward is allegedly what warrants that. I'm suspicious of it, but I get it. It's not the only model out there of this nature that has Ohio State that high, by the way. Georgia is still our number 2 team. There is still about a 1.25 point difference in our model between Alabama and Georgia. Here's essentially what that means. It's a coin flip if they played in Atlanta Saturday, and Alabama's our number 1 team. This really started to feel like 2011 in the SEC, at least, to the model a couple of weeks ago. So we started talking about it. Now I think that's clear to everyone. In 2011, Alabama and LSU were on this death march to a November matchup against each other. Alabama and Georgia are separating themselves within their conference that same way, but they don't meet in the regular season. So the earliest they would face off would be in the SEC championship game. I think we'll probably end up going to that. I don't have anything else to do that day, Colin. So I say that to say this. Back then, the only way that one of them was going to get knocked out of the BCS championship game was that they had to play each other. And so the thinking out there was, oh, well, a maximum of one of them will make the title game, because there's no way that both of them are going to be able to play in the title game. They play each other in the regular season. Well then, and I want to emphasize this, my Iowa State Cyclones, I think on a Thursday night, ended up beating Oklahoma State. I was in a movie theater. I was watching the movie J. Edgar. That's how little faith I had. And shame on me. But then the iJosh, which I don't even think I was an Apple customer at the time, so whatever nondescript cell phone I had, it started going off. Can you believe what Oklahoma State just did? What, beat them by 40? No, they lost. And so I can't remember a thing about J. Edgar. Luckily, it was a movie based on history, so I already know the story. Because otherwise, if I was watching Jurassic Park that night, I would have been useless. Because I was freaking out. Because I realized we could actually have a rematch. And then justly, might I add, justly, we got Alabama LSU in the title game. Well, that is starting to become a concern for a lot of you. And I'm cautioning you, don't worry about it. And I'm going to tell you why, because I just looked at my calendar and it says October 5th. So stop worrying about the playoff. I had someone ask me today, hey, it's been a great Renaissance season and all, but if Alabama and Georgia were to face off for the national title, would that ruin it? Friend, it would only ruin your college football season if you let one game define your football season. So even if you hate Georgia and Alabama, don't worry about it. Like, why should that have any impact on San Jose State versus Colorado State Saturday? Why do I mention that game? Because we're about to add it to the Ramen Noodle Express. Let's wrap it up with that. So I already put Memphis plus 4.5 on the Ramen Noodle Express earlier in the week, and it moved down to 3.5. So I hope you guys got it. This is why it is so imperative. Be following on Twitter and Instagram at LateKickJosh. So Memphis plus 4.5, we've already put on the Ramen Noodle Express. We're adding 2 more games. One of them, oh boy, it's square. It's as square as a Cheez-It, but we're going to do it anyway because the model likes it. Wake Forest is favored by 6. They're on the road at Syracuse. It is a classic too good to be true line, but the model likes it. So I don't really care if 100% of the public's on it. We're going to be right there with you. and we're going to complete the 100%. So Wake Forest -6, get it before it goes to, there's some 5.5s out there right now, actually. It wasn't wide enough available for me to offer it, so 5.5 is a dead number anyway. We'll take Wake Forest -6. And San Jose State, they really struggle to do things up to and including scoring, but the model likes them. So whomst are we to question when the model likes someone? San Jose State +2, they're on the road at Colorado State. That is where Vandy ended up winning a game for us. So if Vandy did it, I mean, certainly San Jose State could pull it. It's not even that far of a flight. So we're taking San Jose State +2, we're taking Wake Forest -6, and we're taking Memphis +4.5. Only 3 games so far. And I can assure you, we're not going to end the week with just 3 games. So make sure you're paying attention on Twitter and Instagram at LateKickJosh. That wraps up our inaugural trip around the new studio. I'm part happy that we're in our new place, high atop downtown Nashville. Beautiful view outside. But I'm most happy that my voice made it. And so I'm going to shut up. I'm going to get off air now. Thank you so much for making this possible. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you check out the Late Kick Extra podcast from earlier today. We had some fun there. There are always some little nuggets on those podcasts, and they're only available there, that never make it on YouTube. They never make it on social media, so you got to be listening. And I know good and well you guys got 30 minutes out of your day to replace something you don't want to be doing with something hopefully you do want to be doing. So with that in mind, we're out of here. For Director Colin, for our entire staff, Jesse and crew in Connecticut, I'm Josh Pate. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and God bless.